All right. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. It's lunchtime here. So this is Lunch with LaunchDarkly, building scale out global applications. This is the name of our cockroach hour today. But first and foremost, I wanted to thank everybody for joining us, taking your time out of your busy day. I hope this is going to be a great session today. I personally love talking to customers, love talking to people that are in the trenches making stuff happen. People that are distributed systems experts and interviewing them and talking to them, I learned tons and just basically the build up to these things. But hopefully this is going to be really valuable to everybody here. Talking about LaunchDarkly and how they've used Cockroach to actually scale out their application, kind of what's going on there. But before we get started, a bit of housekeeping. Of course, we get asked every time, will the recording be available at the event? Absolutely. We'll send a follow-up to everybody who's registered. And then we post everything to our YouTube channel, typically the day of. I don't want to give an SLA, but it should be on our YouTube channel later today. Please do ask questions in the QA panel. Again, this is an interview with somebody, a practitioner. So, let's all learn from each other. And, we'll be monitoring the QA along the way. And then also engage in chat if you like that better. Sometimes we get these kind of crazy chat conversations where it's back and forth and lots of things going on. So we encourage any and all of the above. Myself and Chris will be joining us in a second. We'll be monitoring that and listening to the conversation and making sure that we get questions in. So if you have any questions, please along the way, do ask them in that form. That'd be great. It would be really awesome. So the session today, we often get asked, is this, what level is this? This is a kind of an intermediate session. We are going to talk about some fairly complex things. This isn't going to be just business value or these high level things. This should be actually hopefully pretty useful from a technical point of view. We have got a bunch of topics. Like I said, we love questions, but we're going to talk about LaunchDarkly and some of the things that they're using CockroachDB for, but more importantly, the business as well. So with that, I want to invite my partners in crime here today. So Justin and Chris, do you want to bring on camera there? Awesome. All right. So thank you both for joining. I will introduce Justin first. Justin Caballero is a senior distributed systems engineer at LaunchDarkly. Justin, I have a whole bunch of questions about your title, first of all. So, but just hello first. I'll talk to you. I'll ask you to explain yourself. But hi, how are you?
Hello. Good afternoon.
All right, good. All right, volume's working. Everybody's good. And then my friend Chris Casano, who is one of our leads in sales engineers, who spends a whole lot of time with customers as well. You want to say hi, Chris?
Hey folks, hey Jim, hey Justin. Good to be on the panel with you here, and yeah, happy to help with any technical questions that folks might have today. Like Jim mentioned, there's the Q&A in the chat. Feel free to post your questions there and I'll try to answer them as quick as I can.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Well, so guys, Justin, thank you for joining. Thank you for doing this, first of all, and more importantly, thank you for being a customer of Cockroach Labs. We are just like overjoyed that a company such as yours, I think, kind of a fast-moving, emerging startup who has, tech that I really dig, joining us. So Justin, just to start, what is your role at LaunchDarkly?
Yeah, so I'm on one of our sort of back-end services squads, if you will. And my squad in particular is known as the Flag Delivery Squad. So we're in charge of basically the services and infrastructure that provide feature flagging info to our customers' SDKs is kind of the crux of what we do. So this is, the part of the infrastructure that's getting feature flags down to end user devices or servers and data centers across the world. We're not technically like a platform squad that's providing infrastructure to the rest of the company, but sort of the work on Cockroach sort of landed with us. So we're sort of a dual purpose squad in that extent.
Well, that's cool. And you're a distributed systems engineer. I'm sorry, but I'm a big fan of all things distributed these days. I think it's a big deal. How long have you been kind of doing distributed systems, Justin?
So yeah, I worked a lot on sort of like web services, I would say, for I don't know, 20 years.
Yeah.
Something like that. So going back to like SOAP stuff, which I'm glad to have left behind. But
yeah.
So yeah, applications talking to each other. It's basically what I've been doing.
That's what it is, right? Well, I'll go a little further back. Like I was a early days customer of BEA Tuxedo, which became WebLogic, and that was that whole kind of beginning of that crazy. And man, when I first saw it, I was like, whoa, this is cool. We were trying to build basically Tuxedo way back then. It was nuts. Like,
yeah,
I mean, yeah, but it was awesome. Loved it.
In this space, like it feels like, you know, things go, it's like nothing new under the sun in a way. It's like, you'll see something new that comes out. It's like, oh, actually, this is this thing that was from 15 years ago.
Well, like you mean kind of like namespaces and Kubernetes and, you know, like
yeah, I mean, there are certainly, I don't know, like Cockroach isn't a good example of something that does feel pretty new, but like, you know,
yeah,
there tends to be trends that tend to cycle. I've noticed around, you know, now things like RPC are very popular, and you know, sort of how many IDLs have been created in the past 10 years for like defining schemas and messaging, and you know, that goes back.
Way back.
Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is, you know, it's, you know, so I'm in marketing, so I don't get to play with tech anymore. I usually tell the guys in the marketing team, somebody's already said this, so, you know, go find it, because, you know, like, and typically huge companies have done half the things we've done, you know, so I think it's all around the board. So, but just Justin, what is feature flagging? If anybody here doesn't know what feature flagging is, check it out. Check out LaunchDarkly, because I think it's, you know, to me, when I first saw it, I was like, oh yeah, that's the future for sure.
Yeah, I had the same impression. So, you know, basically like the mission of the company is to empower teams to deliver and control their software. And so what that means to us is sort of a fundamental concept of first being able to separate the act of like deploying software from like releasing features. So you can put a software, you know, into production, but you control like when certain features are available to which sets of users. So and that's very powerful, because it decouples those two things and gives you a lot of flexibility and control to make, you know, immediate runtime changes to how your software works. And this could be on someone's device, right, or in someone's car. We have a lot of use cases. We're not just talking about server farms. There's software everywhere, right? And so LaunchDarkly can enable all those like use cases. And then the other part is sort of the control and the ability to see, you know, from that point of like, we can sort of modify how your software works at runtime. We can also track, you know, do analytics based on that. So we can see like which users are getting which features, and we can hook that into experimentation. We can provide you all the data associated with that if you want to do your own analytics. You know, we can tie it into APM, so you can have automated, like if I enable this feature and performance tanks, like I can automatically have it switched off. You know, there's just a lot of different sort of use cases that come out of that. So it's really about giving developers control. And like once you start using feature flags, like you can't live without them. It's like
it's one of those things. Once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Yeah,
right? Like it's like once you've been there, you just can't come back. Like
it's like, how did I get by without this? It seems like a necessary part of your toolkit.
And this is one of those things that I think, like you just said, like this, like the database, this is what we're doing is kind of new. This is kind of new to me. I mean, I used to make files and builds in the middle of the night, and like, oh my God, what a nightmare. You know, I didn't, you know, this is just like heaven. Just here, take this feature and put it out there for me, please. Awesome. Yeah. So that's awesome. So that's great. And like I said, if anybody you haven't seen LaunchDarkly, you're a developer, go check it out. It's pretty badass. So so let's talk a little bit about LaunchDarkly and Cockroach and kind of, you know, what you all are doing there. But let's just start with, you know, how did you first get exposed to Cockroach, and what did you see as interesting in this database, Justin?
Yeah, I suppose it's kind of a cheat to say this, but I like to think of my first exposure as maybe like reading the Spanner paper from a decade ago.
Fair. That's totally fair. Me too, by the way.
Yeah, at the time, everyone, you know, was super excited about it, but it seemed like something, oh, this is great for Google. You know, I can't do this. And then, you know, they made it, now it's available as part of GCP, but still, if you're not running on GCP. So I actually didn't hear about Cockroach directly until it was like through a colleague, maybe a year and a half ago. We were looking for databases that could sort of improve our multi-region story. And I just started, you know, watching videos, you guys' videos about it online, and went to a meetup, and was like, oh, wow, this is cool. This is like, you know, it's in this lineage of Spanner, and it's bringing that to everybody. it's like, this is great. And, you know, we were really looking for sort of we wanted to be able to tell like a zero RTO RPO story. And so that really, you know, when we evaluated Cockroach against other things we were looking at that were multi-region, like say AWS Aurora or similar products, is like, I don't know, we just felt that this was the best fit for that.
Well, I'm happy that you felt we were the best. I'm a little kind of a homer, so I think we're best, but that's another story. But by the way, I too was first exposed to this with the Spanner white paper, and it's I was at Hortonworks at the time. And, you know, and you can imagine we were like, oh my God, this is distributed transactions. This is cool. And we were working on Hive, and we had Hive. What was it, Chris? LLAP. What was that thing called? Like,
yeah, LLAP. Yeah.
Yeah. And we were just starting to build that out. Right. And I was just like, whoa, this is cool. But it is. And I think once you get into these kind of concepts, I think it's really interesting. And that's why I love your title, honestly, Justin, is like the distributed systems. Once you get into like the thinking of how these things work, it's one thing to understand how it kind of functions, but it's a wholly other thing in reality when you're a practitioner using these sort of things, right? So,
yeah.
But I love that it was you know, the resilience story, and you know, that comes back to our name, Cockroach, right? Can't kill it, right? So the RTO RPO thing, right? And so how's LaunchDarkly using Cockroach today?
So right now we're in the middle of migrating all of our existing, like what we call our core data. So things that aren't in very specialized storage systems, we're migrating to Cockroach. So currently we have a single region deployment, but we're looking to sort of expand that in the near term. And so, yeah, we've got, you know, basically all of our account data for customers, users, you know, the organizations, all the feature flagging information, all that stuff is going to go into Cockroach, as well as things around like integration. Like we have numerous integrations with other products. So there's information about that. There's, you know, some authorization type things. So yeah, we're in the middle of this migration. I'd say we're maybe half done, something like that. So hopefully, you know, our target is to be completely off of our old systems, you know, pretty soon.
Yeah, I mean, phase migration is too risky to do everything at once, of course, right? I mean, you are the feature flagging company. So, right, like, of course, there's the mitigate the risk thing. What are you guys migrating from? And kind of why, you know, is it the resilience thing mostly, or?
It was really the resilience thing. Yeah, the wanting to go multi-region and have a system that was designed for that first, right? Like not as an add-on. So I've seen some solutions where it's like, yes, we have a great, you know, this works great in a single region setting, but when we go to expand it, it's sort of like, oh, we've added these features. It's just very hard to manage that, and you've got to deal with a lot more stuff. So yeah, the sort of designed first for like cloud native multi-region architecture was what we wanted, and then the high resilience, and being able to tell a customer the story of like, we could lose the East Coast and you wouldn't notice, like that. That's compelling to some of our customers. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, developers lose their code and they freak out. We just saw this yesterday, everybody, right? Like the whole Fastly thing, people were freaking out, like, oh my God. Yeah. So they're a little finicky, I think, this audience, right? So it was a fun day yesterday to watch that. Yeah, that's cool. So you guys you're kind of doing a slower migration. You guys, is it fair to say you're taking kind of like, I guess, less risky workloads to start with, Justin, and then kind of moving up the path?
Yeah. So we did start with, you know, we didn't, we chose sort of what we thought would be the easiest and, you know, the least exposed if something went wrong work to begin with. So we migrated some data from Postgres, which we thought, oh, this will be a good fit because at least it's SQL. The rest of our stuff is in a document store. Yeah. And that was interesting as well. It's we can talk about that. But so we did begin with that. It turned out that the workload that we chose to start with ended up being one of the more complicated ones, just because the SQL queries we had were using some interesting Postgres features, and they were very kind of complicated queries that were doing a lot of heavy lifting that you might think sometimes you would just do an application code. But so they were pretty beefy queries. And so that actually was, I think it was actually a good move because it helped us really dig into Cockroach, and also be with a feature that's not as critical as like the core flagging information. So yeah, we did learn quite a bit about that. And now, that's behind us. And, so we've been like learning about how to make our queries performant, what types of things to avoid when you're using a, more distributed database than something like Postgres, where you're just dealing with a single master node, right? And everything is sort of local to that node, is super fast, and it's just a different set of concerns. So yeah, what else are we're migrating now? Are we haven't moved on to our core flag stuff, but we're doing sort of things around the edges, like kind of simple things like what we call like our dashboards, which is basically a saved view for users of the UI. Maybe filter, it's pretty simple stuff. And these have been fun because they've been easier, and we get like single-digit latencies because the queries are so simple. So we've been very happy to see like that we can get good performance out of Cockroach, even though it's.
That's all single region though, right? At this point?
Yes, it's single region. So we do expect when we go multi, as we're looking at our multi-region architecture, we're going to sort of optimize for making the writes as quick as we can. So we're going to have another region sort of like as a write buddy that's like as close as we can to our main region today. And then as we sort of expand out our infrastructure, we'll probably kind of try to maintain that. How can we, minimize the write latencies?
Right.
And then be able to provide that sort of multi-region.
But the move to multi-region is all around the resilience side, right? I mean, that's the core driver, right? It had nothing. I mean, the latency thing, will help eventually, right? I mean, I think, but I think it's more the resilience thing, right?
It is primarily, yeah. And so there may be a point where we start to look at like the geo partitioning thing more, but it just doesn't fit as that naturally right now with the way our systems work.
Sure.
And so I am interested to see at some point if we can use like I think it's called the duplicated indexes topology for some of our very low frequency write data or static data, just so we can like trade off some of that latency for, make the reads faster and the writes a bit slower. So when I saw that topology, I was really excited about it. It seemed like very cool.
Well, it just came from direct kind of requests from customers like yourself. It's honestly like the funny thing is when you work in a company like this and people start using your database at scale, we learn a lot from our customers. And that's one of those patterns that just kept coming up. And we had to figure out like, okay, look at in the Spanner paper, they don't talk about that stuff, right? Because that wasn't a problem for them. It was Google. They had complete control, but in reality, wow, there's so many different weird cases that come up, and I think it's kind of interesting to go through those. Like I can't wait to see the, like non-voting replicas, the duplicated indexes, like some really kind of cool stuff, but it's a little bit more advanced, right? Like you didn't understand that stuff when you first started, right, Justin? I mean, it was a little bit of learning curve, right?
There certainly is. I mean, we did an eval and played with some of these things, but the things that we learned when we were actually implementing were different than what we discovered in the evaluation. So yeah, it's a very deep product, Cockroach, and I'm so happy that the docs are so thorough. It's really given us a big help, helping us like even know what to ask if we need to go to support.
Well, amen to our documentation team. And anybody's ever seen me on one of these things before, at some point on every single public speaking thing I do, I say something nice about our docs team because I think they do a phenomenal job. It's just, Jesse's a poet, actually. The guy who leads all our documentation is actually a poet. So I think it actually comes off, but that whole team does a phenomenal job. I want to come back to something though. You talked about this migration from Postgres to Cockroach, and you kind of had to refactor queries. Were you refactoring queries because of kind of the distributed nature of Cockroach, or the difference in syntax, right? Because there are things that we just don't do in Cockroach that are native to Postgres, right? And it's because it's distributed too. I think it's a little bit of both, but can you talk to me about that refactoring a little bit? It's really, really interesting.
Yeah, there were both. One of the things that we did was when we created the Cockroach schema, we were sure to make sure to use UUIDs for our primary keys, which
it's a key best practice.
That was a pretty obvious one we got right out of the gate. So we didn't have that a monotonic sequence for our primary keys. But the other things, there were some dialect differences that were just like, there's a similar function in Postgres as there is in Cockroach, but it's just got a different name. So we need to figure those out, and that's not too bad. What were some of the other things? One of the problems we had was around cascading deletes. So we have this workload where we may have a single call to our API that results in like tens of thousands of rows being deleted in the database. And we were getting, in one of the older versions of Cockroach, I think there's been a fix since, but we would get like command too large errors because it was just trying to build a thing too big with these cascading deletes. So, we did do some work to like using a feature flag to be able to control, like, do we want to cascade this delete or do we want to do it in a batch fashion? And so we can like decide on the fly which approach we want to do. And so we sort of took your advice. It's in the documentation and from support to like try to break up those commands to make them smaller so they'll run a little faster and, fit in a size that can be messaged between the nodes, right? That's kind of the issue.
Well, that's the funny thing about distributed systems. You have to actually think about those sort of things. I think it's really interesting. Let me come back to that. But Chris, I know you deal with a lot with customers. Can you explain the UUID problem and why you need to use that? I know, Chris, you're out there talking to a lot of people about this stuff, right? Like, what is that? Why do you need that on each table?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So one thing Cockroach likes is distribution. We don't want you to get into the trap of having a hot range where all your traffic is going to one shard or one range of the database. So with things like UUIDs, they allow you to actually, get more distribution of your keys across the cluster. So that way all the ranges and all the nodes are, performing parallel tasks for you, as opposed to just, hey, everything's getting into a hotspot. Right. So the more you can make use of them, typically the better off you are. And, just to add to the conversation here too. So, been working with Justin for some time, but the approach that I think LaunchDarkly took here is just a textbook approach, right? They just didn't jump right into the deep end of the pool and say, we're going to do multi-region, we're going to do all these crazy things and let's go. They've walked into the shallow end and been really patient and really methodical about how to go about using Cockroach in the right ways. And, there's some learning things across the way that, Justin and team have found, but we've given our best as far as how to educate and help and support them on their journey. So I just want to say I really appreciate been working with LaunchDarkly for some time, just how their approach and the methodology they've used here.
Yeah, we're seeing that time and time again, and that's why I wanted to ask about that, Justin. Like, where did you start? Because I think that's one of those things. Like, you could understand all these concepts, but you just jump into it feet first or head first. It's too much, man. You're gonna run into these weird things, right?
Yeah, for sure. You want to take something small, like, the philosophy is like basically small reversible steps that are like low risk individually, right? You'd always want to weigh out, and you don't want to impact your current like SLOs, certainly. So finding sort of what you think will be the easiest thing to start with, least impactful if you get it wrong. The other thing that we did was, there's sort of a naive approach to doing this kind of thing, which might be like you declare like an outage window and you like do an import from one database to the other, and then you come back up. So like, that's not something that's going to work for a lot of companies nowadays, right? You can't take downtime.
Right.
And so, we've followed an approach that it's a pretty common approach. I think you can find videos and talks about it, but basically running both databases together and sending queries, identical queries to each. And so that was also an important like risk mitigation approach for us, because we don't want, we can't just all of a sudden start using Cockroach. Like we want to see that it works in production without actually having it connected to users. And so, having it sort of run next to our original data store and being able to observe it, monitor it, check for performance, check for correctness. We compare the results of the two databases and log metrics if we find differences. So, we are pretty conservative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Justin, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're kind of using you're using LaunchDarkly to do that, right? Like, I mean,
yeah, exactly, for sure. So, for each of our workloads, we have what you can think of as like a repository interface is a common name for it, which essentially is these are the functions that we're using to access the data. And we provide two implementations of that, one with Cockroach and one with our previous store. And then we use feature flags to control which one is connected, which ones run, and which ones are connected to the end user, which is like the source of truth. And so we can gradually roll out Cockroach to, on a percentage basis. We can say we're going to do this for 10% of customers. We're going to watch it, see what it looks like. We'll turn it back if it's not looking good and go do some fixes and then start again. And so feature flags enable all of that. We can do that in an instant without having to do deploys. So yeah, that's certainly been a big enabler.
Well, it's, every once in a while, somebody will say a sentence and it involves the word cockroach, and the 14-year-old in me just laughs. Like, I'm sorry, you guys, but everyone, like, I've been here, I don't know, almost 3 years. And it's like, yeah, we deploy Cockroach out to our customers. It just sounds funny to me sometimes. I don't know. And 9 out of 10 times, every time we get like a Hacker News post, somebody's like, yeah, but that name, I don't know. Yeah.
I love the name. When I heard it, it's like, oh yeah, this is like a totally perfect name for this product. So.
It is. I love it or hate it. You don't forget it. That's for sure. So how many people are kind of touching Cockroach? I mean, outside of developers, because, developers are kind of working with these things, but like from an operations point of view and like propping it up, dealing with it, how many people are kind of managing the system now, Justin?
Right now, it's just 2 of us.
Yeah.
And so we have, we've started having other teams using it. So they're building, they're migrating data sets or building new data sets on top of it. But actually the infrastructure part, there's just 2 of us. So yeah, we took a pretty simple approach, like, similar to what I think I heard DoorDash describe in the previous live stream, where they're just using, normal compute nodes. And, so it's good. It's something that's good for 2 people to manage.
Yeah.
I think that'll probably shift over time. It'll probably graduate from the team that I'm on now to like a more platform-oriented team. To take care of it.
Cool.
There was a good question in the chat that I thought we'd just bring up real quick. So I know we hit on a little bit of this before, but Justin, as you did that migration from Postgres to Cockroach, were there any other ANI patterns that you found along the way? I know we talked about UUIDs before, but anything else that popped up when that effort?
There were some. So we had to look at the query plans for Cockroach, and this is sort of a case by case thing. And we had to rewrite some of the queries to make sure that like they were performant. Now, I don't know that there's a general takeaway from that other than to look at the query plans and see if there's a problem. The other thing I would just say is like, try to keep your SQL simple.
Yep.
That goes a long way.
Yep.
If you can avoid, if there's a way to, you can get the transaction boundaries you want, or like not, obviously you don't want to do a lot of round trips. So, sometimes you need to make a more complicated statement, but if you can keep your SQL small, like it's very easy to make it fast. Other than that, it's, for our other less complicated workloads, it converted pretty easily. So one of the things, we were using some extensions for like type for case insensitivity, which are available with Postgres. And so we had to do a little extra like syntax in the Cockroach side using collate statements to like make sure that the case insensitive searches work. So there were some like weird things like that, but they were all pretty solvable.
Cool. Chris, do you want to ask this question from Peter? I think it's a really good one here. About the bulk inserts and sizes. Right. I'll do it. I'm like,
so there was a really good question. Jim, you got it.
Yeah, there was a good question that came in, and actually this came up in the DoorDash interview as well, Justin, when he was talking about inserts and like when you're doing bulk inserts, like how do you kind of figure out the size, the number of rows for each one of those things that, that's going to have the best performance, right? Like, I think what Sean had said, like, yeah, we had this insert of like 10,000 records. We made it like 1,000 records each with 10 statements, right? To distribute that, right? Like, have you guys been through that? And how did you guys figure out the trade-offs for performance versus, size of bulk?
Yeah, I don't think we've done that on the insert side. We did sort of do that on the delete side where, again, we used a feature flag with an integer value to dial like the size of the batch. And so we just tried some numbers to see which one seemed like it worked best for that case. I can't say that we've come up with like a general, like I don't think we've seen it enough to have like directed general advice for that. I don't know. Chris might have a better answer.
Yeah, I mean, typically what we'll find is that a lot of small transactions work well. So, I mean, we just tested something with another customer where we needed to load, I think, about 100 million records within 20 minutes. So we just found that just having really small batches, but a lot of them was the way to go. So it depends. Like sometimes your batches, they might have to hit multiple ranges, right? Maybe your batch just hits one range, and that's going to be faster for you. So it's a little bit of trial and error, but I would say just have in the back of your mind that a lot of little small transactions will typically help you scale up for the right performance.
Keep your SQL simple.
Yep.
Comma, KISS, I guess. Keep your SQL simple. I'm going to start using that. I like it. I'm going to bumper stickers. But I think it's right though. The question's kind of tough to answer because if it's just simple inserts, yeah, great. If it's inserts that are cascading across like multiple tables, well, you're going to get into, and so it really depends on what you're trying to do, right? And I think we see this time and time again as well, Justin. And I think that's what Sean was saying. It took a little bit of like experimentation, and you kind of get used to it. You get in this different mindset, right? So,
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So.
One thing I wanted to mention that I forgot about the migration that has been good for us is that we're starting to migrate like document stored data now, JSON data, and it's been nice to see that Cockroach can handle that pretty well. So we're just like able to drop like JSON documents into the database and write queries against those, and they've been performing well. So I'd say to folks, if you're coming from a non-SQL database and looking at Cockroach, like it could work.
So Justin, from a deployment point of view, are you guys running just on raw containers on VMs? Are you in pods and Kubernetes?
Oh yeah, so there's no Kubernetes. Yeah, so we're basically just using EC2 instances with traditionally managed like infrastructure as code, like Terraform type stuff. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
we may look at Kubernetes again, but until we feel like we want to invest more people in being able to operate that, because it is a level of complexity up. Right?
Yes, it is. That's for sure. Was that really the decision? I mean, is that kind of the reason why you guys kind of landed in that? I mean, did you even consider anything else at that point? Or
we didn't really consider. Yeah, I mean the cloud. There's Cockroach Cloud, which for us, we felt like we wanted the control of like running the database. And then the Kubernetes, if we were using Kubernetes a lot previously, it just seemed like we didn't want to do two new things, right? It's so we have a way we're deploying all our other infrastructure. We're just going to do that.
Yep.
But that's not. I think the Kubernetes approach looks good, like from what I've read about it, and I like the rolling updates and those types of features. So I'm interested to play with it. But
yeah, for us, I mean, it was a no-brainer. I mean, we're just managing so many clusters, like the trade-off from a pure just cost of operations relative to just doing it on bare metal or whatever we wanted to do. It just made a whole lot of sense for us. And Cockroach Cloud runs on Kubernetes because we have an SRE team it was built for that, right? Like that was like Spanner was to Borg. I love Kelsey Hightower's tweet. Spanner was to Borg as kind of like Cockroach is to Kubernetes. Yeah, what you guys get it? You know what I mean? So same kind of paradigm. So
yeah, the number of nodes we're running is not anywhere near what.
Yeah,
we can still manage it with traditional approach.
Yeah. And so, Chris, there was a question. Is there a Cockroach Kubernetes operator?
And there is. I was just going to respond to Mike, who sent this out. Yeah. So there is a Kubernetes operator. If you go to our docs, it's right in there. Supported for GKE and is certified in the Red Hat marketplace. So you can certainly make use of it. And, you know, we have a whole engineering team around it as far as, you know, giving it all the love that it needs.
You know, when I first landed here at Cockroach, I remember I had arguments internally about if we needed an operator or not, because we are so like aligned with Kubernetes. Like there was like big debate, and it's kind of like, it's the day two stuff. It's like the rolling upgrades, like some of the more manual stuff, like, but just purely deploying just us on top of stateful sets. It's fairly straightforward to get Cockroach up on Kubernetes, right? So, but of course, yeah, we have an operator as well. So, any other questions, Chris? Any other questions? Anybody else? I'm sorry, Justin, did you?
I was going to say, yeah, it's been, you know, it's very nice how easy it is to run Cockroach. I was just going to say that, you know, it's just like pass in some arguments and you get your executable and you're off. So,
well, thanks, Chris. Well, I mean, thanks, Justin. Well, I'm looking at Chris and I said, Justin, like, you know, what the hell am I doing here? Thanks, Justin. Yeah, you know, I think we've done the engineering team's done a pretty good job of trying to make this as simple as possible. I think that's, you know, a lot of our focus here at Cockroach is how do we make even these more complex operations even more simple? We want to put this in the hands of every developer. And so, like, do I want developers thinking about indexes and keys and, you know, like, and so like, I think that's where we're headed. You know, as we think about our roadmap, how do we just simplify? I don't want a developer to ever have to think about database. I just want a SQL API in the cloud. And I think that's the ultimate vision. And then run these things as services and feature flag things in and out. And we're living in a different world than, gosh, 25 years ago when I started this whole thing. So
that's true.
It's fun. So cool. If there's no more questions, again, you know, Justin, thank you so much for doing this. It means a whole lot. I hope it was valuable for everybody. Chris, thanks for jumping on here and being part of the conversation as well. Any parting conversation or any parting words for anybody? Anybody, Chris, Justin? Put you on the spot, right? You know?
I mean, you know, it's crawl, walk, run. I think that was the lesson that I learned with LaunchDarkly was, you know, their approach. They just took it one step at a time as opposed to just jumping in, breaking everything, causing all kinds of havoc. You know, it's you know, Cockroach is very much a relational database, and you want to treat it that way, but it's also behind it's a distributed system. So you have to think about both of those things together. Yeah, that was my largest lesson learned here. I don't know if Justin, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, no, me too. I think that hits the nail on the head. And I just, you know, thanks you guys. I appreciate all your support helping us through this journey.
Yeah. Well, you guys are a great customer, and honestly, we're all living in the same place together too, the same space. My takeaway is KISS. Keep your SQL simple, right? I think that's going to be I'm going to carry bumper stickers inside the company now. So, all right. Well, thank you guys for doing this very much. Thanks everybody for joining as well. Again, recording will be up on our YouTube channel this afternoon. I'm pretty sure. But I hope this was useful for everybody. There will be a survey when the event ends here. So please do, please give us feedback in that survey. It's really important for us to get these things right. We try to keep the right level of tech and business and kind of try to make it entertaining along the way as well. So again, Chris, thank you, buddy. I'll see you later. And Justin, thanks again for everything. And thanks for being such a great customer. It's really, really, on behalf of the whole company. Thank you, buddy.